This is episode 39 of Adventures in Supply Chain podcast. I'm Marcia, your host, and today we have an amazing guest, Jonathan Quinn, to talk about sustainable packaging, in particular, flexible packaging. Let me know what you think and enjoy the episode. Good morning, Jonathan. Thank you very much for joining us today that we have a very hot topic. So thank you.
No, thank you, Marcia, for having me. I'm really excited to be here and really excited to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, but it's becoming a topic that everybody is concerned about, and I think we all have very good reason to be concerned about it.
Yes, exactly. And it's very dynamic too, right? So many changes there. So, Jonathan, can you tell us about yourself, what you do, what you did?
Yeah. So right now, I'm the director of market development and sustainability for Pregis. Pregis is a packaging company, and we have a heavy emphasis and focus on flexible packaging. But I have a very long history with packaging. I grew up around the packaging industry. I have pictures of me in a box of resin when I was 2, and I was in the lab doing testing when I was 5 on materials. And I went to school and studied packaging and business at Clemson in South Carolina. And I actually did an internship with Pregis while I was a student. And then recently I've come back to Pregis. I say I come back to Pregis, but been at Pregis now for about a year and a half. But really what we've done is Pregis has been an organization that really anybody who's ever bought anything through e-commerce, whether it's from Amazon, Walmart, Target, anybody has come in contact with the products that we make. But now we've expanded and really grown our presence within flexible packaging, making best-in-class blown film. So we've made a heavy investment in our ability and capabilities around making blown film. So for anybody that is wondering, well, what's blown film? It's a traditional flexible film that you would see in your food packaging or anything else that you may come in contact with the flexible materials. And so we've really been focused in creating growth. But the key part of what we've been doing is really being and having a sustainability first mindset, and leading all of our conversations with sustainability at the forefront. We've developed products and solutions to deliver and enable sustainability. And one of the exciting things for me is to be a part of Pregis when we have a material neutral offering. In that, yes, we have a plastic offering, but we also have paper offering as well. And that's something that you don't necessarily find too often within the packaging industry. But the key part of the conversation, and I think the key part for me, has been really getting people to understand that there's science and factual-based reasoning that goes into material selection and the tools that we have at our hands to make sure that the materials that we're selecting fit and support the application, and do so in a sustainable way, making sure that science and fact are making those decisions, and it's not decisions that are based on maybe emotions. Because when you make a decision based on emotion, that tends to have unintended financial and environmental consequences. So those are the things that we look out for to make sure that we're making educated decisions.
Right. Yes, I understand the emphasis on data, right, is to support the decision that when a company selects their flexible packaging, they need to consider that it needs to be functional, so meet their requirements. And one of those requirements, sustainability, that is very important, as you were mentioning. And we were talking at the beginning, and flexible packaging is key for CPG companies. And
Correct.
there have been many changes with the pandemic, right? Material shortages. So, but what are the trends that you see with flexible packaging now that we are post-COVID?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, one of the big trends that's been impacting flexible packaging is the rise of e-commerce, which Pregis has had a heavy presence. And prior to my time at Pregis was one of the areas that I was heavily focused on. And it's not just necessarily the traditional sense, but food e-commerce is one of those critical areas that can get overlooked, and the unintended consequences of e-commerce and what that can have on, from a sustainability perspective, on food packaging. But if you look at more broadly and take a step back and look at what are those key trends that are really driving the flexible packaging in the packaging industry more broadly, it is a conversation around that rigid packaging to flexible packaging transition or transformation. That's something that has been going on for years, and it's something that's going to continue as flexible packaging continues to deliver functional ease, convenience. But one of the key things that flexible packaging is able to enable is sustainability from that standpoint, in the weight and the eliminating of having to ship and transport. If you think about it, understanding the whole supply chain. So let's just talk about baby food, for example. So for years and years, baby food came in a glass jar or in a plastic cup. Well, those glass jars or those plastic cups have to be made by a manufacturer. And then those empty glass jars or empty cups have to be put on a truck and then shipped and then filled and sealed. And they have a weight to them. Comparatively, if you look at that baby food market today, it's transitioned to a fitmented pouch, and it's easier with kids. I mean, we sometimes think, I have young kids, as you can see. I've just gone through that process, and we're about to have another one. But the point being there is that instead of having to ship empty trucks, you're able to ship full trucks. You're not shipping air, you're shipping roll stock film that is lighter weight, that adds an element of convenience, but ultimately adds an element of sustainability. And those are some of those things that all come together when you talk about that rigid to flexible transformation or transition. I think really material selection is one of the key aspects of, and design for recyclability is one of those key things that is happening within the flexible packaging industry. Really enabling materials and monomaterial usage and different orientation to provide different performance related characteristics is one thing that I would say. So there's a number of things, but ultimately that key driver across the board and that key trend driver is going to be sustainability.
Perfect. And as you were mentioning, Jonathan, this transition and what companies are looking at when they are selecting the materials, what are the most common errors or areas that we need to watch for when we are doing that, when a company is selecting the materials?
So material selection is critical for a number of different reasons, but it's making sure that you're driving towards materials that are recyclable, making sure, and that's one of the things that it's we have to watch out for, and we have to find ways to enable recyclability. We have to find ways to make it convenient and easy for the consumer. And so within the US market, polyethylene is the most recyclable from a flexible standpoint, or PET from a rigid standpoint. So those are some of the things to watch out for. Also, finding ways to use material substitution. So if you're looking at a nylon-based structure, being able to use EVOH or a barrier coating to provide those barrier and performance properties. But ultimately, all of this comes down to really understanding what is the product that you are trying to protect, and how are you trying to protect it? Is it from a cushioning standpoint, like when we talk about e-commerce and providing protection as it goes through transportation? Is it a cold chain perspective? So are you trying to thermally protect the product in a way? Or is it a barrier conversation like I just mentioned? And are you trying to extend the product shelf life? Are you trying to enable the product to be able to sit on the shelf longer, to sit in somebody's pantry or refrigerator longer? Because ultimately, the biggest issue that we have, not just in the US, but globally, is food waste. And so leveraging material selection to help us enable the reduction and elimination of food waste is something very, very critical, and something that we cannot lose sight of. And people can say, well, we should get rid of plastic, and we should get rid of plastic packaging, and we should put everything in a paper bag. You will have unintended financial and environmental consequences by doing that, because you're going to significantly create higher amounts of food waste, which is going to have a significant greater impact on the environment than using plastic materials. So those are some of the things that I would say has to be looked at. And these conversations and the consequences of these conversations, and some of the legislative conversations that are happening today in the US and Canada and other countries, and even Europe. If you look at Europe and France and elimination of produce films, those films are designed to extend the product shelf life. Those films are designed and there to extend the actual life of the food, to eliminate food waste. And when you make these legislative, emotionally driven decisions, it has those unintended environmental and financial consequences.
Yes, very, very clear. Very clear. And about the financial consequences, because one of the trends, yes, is to protect the environment. But as a buyer, for being in procurement, the challenge that we face is the cost. And cost is one of the metrics, right, that in general the teams have. So what is the difference, and what we need to look at? Because we want to look at the total cost of ownership, not only the price, but we need to be able to sell this to management. So what are the difference in cost of regular film, for instance, and a sustainable option?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's a complex question, and it's one that it takes some layers of understanding to really break it down. So the first thing I would say, if you were to kind of do a little bit of a generalization, if you're moving from call it a traditional mixed material, non-recyclable film structure to a, whether it's a recycled content or whether it's PCR or advanced recycled content or whatever it may be, you're probably going to be in the ballpark of 15 to 20% higher, which is a lot. Now there is brands and there's people that have talked within the broader CPG world and in the packaging world that, oh, the consumer is going to pay for it. Consumer research shows that consumers will pay more. At the end of the day, it's when the rubber meets the road, those consumers are not going to pay for it. When you have to understand that on average, 75% of the US consumers have a household income of less than $100,000.
Hey, this is Marcia here. Really quick. Hope you are enjoying this episode. If you like it, please leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. It would be amazing. Let's come back to the episode.
When you have, they're making choices on what they buy, and if you're charging more for Oreos or you're charging more for a lettuce bag or whatever it may be, people are going to make the decisions based on those financial implications. And as we move into I think we all can agree and we know that right now we're sitting in some uncertain economic times. And so does that potentially bring forward the risk of people being less likely? Number one, they're going to be less likely to probably pay a premium for a sustainable solution. But does that kind of cause a pause by the brands from making that transition? There is that risk too. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up that I think is one of those it's not very widely talked about, but it has, from a procurement base, has a significant impact, and that is the impact of legislation. And EPR, which is extended producer responsibility bills that are being and are coming forward in states, and they're going to continue to come forward over time, where if you aren't making and bringing forward these sustainable packaging solutions, then you are going to be taxed and you are going to be penalized. So either you pay for it on the front end with the material, and that's where you have the ability to control it and do things, or you pay for it on the back end when you're taxed for not having a sustainable film solution, not having necessarily the right products or materials that meet the legislative conversations. So while it may be 15% on the front end, you could be paying 25% or 30% to a tax or to wherever. So that's where it's a very tricky conversation. It's going to be a very complex situation going forward, and the differences and the variations that exist from state to state as far as the legislative conversations, those are things that we need to be paying attention to. Your listeners, no matter whether what side or what product they may be looking after or producing, there's going to be implications, and that's one of the things that I get so passionate about, is being a part of those legislative conversations and helping those legislators understand the unintended consequences of what they're doing, and making sure that these decisions are based on science and fact. And recently I met with the California legislature, and they were making some bills about banning plastic materials in the state of California. And I said, the bans that you are putting in place and how you are doing it is similar to you banning heart medication without talking to a cardiologist, without trusting the science of a cardiologist. You're just saying, oh, no, this is bad. But you don't understand, by banning that heart medication, what that consequence is going to have. And those are those broad, when legislators are making those decisions, we have to be a part of those conversations.
Yes, and also the timing, because we need to consider that now we are in a time, in a moment that many companies are facing excess inventory. They have overstock.
Yep.
And we are talking about Walmart, that we see that on the news, about Nike. So a change in the regulations mean that they will need to make a change in their packaging, and that is an additional cost, right?
Yeah, I mean, what changes and how does that impact repacking, and how do you need to rework? I mean, the rework that could and will be impacted because of the inventory carrying and some of those, I would say, more durable goods versus food. That's where certainly you have to watch out for things like that.
Yes, yes. And in your experience, what companies or customers have been more aggressive with sustainability? Like I have seen Walgreens, for example, that is very demanding, but what has been your experience? What examples have you seen that are putting more pressure on sustainable materials?
I would say there's a number of brand owners that are putting the right step forward. I would say we've got a long way to go, but when you look at, I really look for people that are enabling a circular economy. So people that aren't just delivering a recyclable package, but they're actually collecting it and getting it back and creating circular programs that enable the circular economy. It's not just a one-stop decision. It's not just a one-stop solution. So there's a number of people. I mean, we've been partnering, and we've recently partnered with PrintPack, who's a major and key flexible packaging converter, and we've also partnered in that whole conversation with ExxonMobil to deliver the first advanced recycled pouch, which was something that was, I mean, it was very, very exciting, but it's creating an opportunity to then partner with a brand to enable that circular economy and to bring things forward. And that's what I would say is partnership is key to the sustainability conversation. There's people that have many, many different solutions, and there's brands with many, many different solutions. But at the end of the day, nobody has a silver bullet to the sustainability and circular economy challenges that we're faced with. And it's going to take partnership and collaboration in order for us to get ourselves headed in the right direction collectively.
That's exciting, all of those developments. And when you work with a company, what are like the steps or best practices for them to move from the regular materials that they are using to a more sustainable solutions?
Just the clarity, what was the first part of that question?
Like what steps a company must take if they want to move from the regular flexible packaging that they have to a more sustainable solution. How can they do that?
Yeah, so I think the first conversation that they have to understand is the recyclability. So and then we can also unpack the incorporation of recycled content. But first, if you want to be sustainable, you want to move towards having it be a recyclable structure. On top of that, you have other opportunities, whether it's down gauging, so reducing the thickness, reducing the weight of the material, eliminating mixed materials. Then from there, it's about looking at how can this product be collected and recycled. So that's the first kind of step in the process is recycling. Because if you're going to be sustainable, you want it to be a circular, all-encompassing. The other aspect is it incorporation of recycled content? Is that post-consumer, or is that advanced recycling? And when I talk about advanced recycling, that is something that is very new. It's early days, but it's going to be incredibly impactful, because it's going to enable incorporation of recycled content, not just in food, but in medical applications and things of that nature, which is where you take a material and you break it back to the monomer state, and then you put it back in and make brand new material from it, without having to worry about any potential degradation from a performance-based situation on materials that you oftentimes get with recycled content, traditional post-consumer recycled content. So those are kind of the things that you have to be looking at, and ultimately making sure that you're following the technical process of going through that evaluation of qualifying as recyclable and how it's going to be recycled, and enabling the actual recycling of those materials itself.
Perfect. Very helpful. So thank you. Thank you very much for the explanations, and thank you so much for all the insight that you have provided, Jonathan. I'm sure the audience will find it very helpful. If they need more help from you, what is the best way to reach you?
Yeah, so I'm on all social media platforms under the headline J Quinn Packaged, but I'm on LinkedIn, and Pregis is where you can find us everywhere. But we'd be happy to help to enable sustainability, whether it's an e-commerce application, or whether it's a food packaging application or a medical application. We're equipped and enabled, and we can help make the connection. If we don't have the material, we can partner and help to do that. So would be more than happy to help in any way possible. And we're really here. I mean, our focus within Pregis is, it comes down to three main pillars. It's to protect, preserve, and inspire. To protect the products in which we package, to preserve the environment, and to inspire people. And those are really what is core to who we are, and opportunities to help people on their sustainability journey is something that we look for whenever possible.
Perfect. And again, thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was a great episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you need help from the procurement perspective with your request for proposal on packaging, please feel free to book a call with me at usmsupplychain.com. And I see you next week with another amazing episode of Adventures in Supply Chain.